Yo, what's good everyone? Faded Lore here. I used to be a hardcore skeptic, wouldn't believe anything I couldn't see with my own two eyes, until 7 years ago. That day, I was standing at the edge of an Alaskan forest, 20 below zero, snow up to my knees, and I saw something that shouldn't exist. We all think we understand this world, but the truth? We're just scratching the damn surface. There are places on this planet where the laws of nature don't mean shit, where compasses spin like tops, where people walk in and never walk out. For the next 60 minutes, we're going through 10 locations that science and government can't explain, places they have no answers for, or worse, places they're trying to hide the truth about. Look, I'm not telling you to believe me, but I swear to God, after hearing this, you'll never look at a map the same way again. And if you've been to one of these places or had a similar experience, tell me about it in the comments. Because maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one. Part 1, Bermuda Triangle. Alright, let's kick this off with the granddaddy of all mysterious places. The Bermuda Triangle. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That old story again? But hold up. There's a reason this place has been freaking people out for decades. Picture this. December 5th, 1945. 5 Avenger torpedo bombers take off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Flight 19. Routine training mission. Clear skies. Experienced pilots. These weren't rookies. The lead pilot had logged over 2,500 flight hours. 2 hours in, something goes wrong. The lead pilot's voice comes through the radio. "We don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost. It looks strange. Even the ocean doesn't look right." Think about that for a second. A veteran pilot saying the ocean doesn't look right. What the hell does that even mean? The last transmission they got from Flight 19. Everything looks wrong. Strange. We can't be sure of any direction. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should. Then silence. Complete radio blackout. The Navy launched a massive search. They sent out a Martin Mariner flying boat with a 13-man crew. And you know what happened to that search plane? It vanished too. Completely gone. That's 27 men. Gone in one night. Not a single body ever recovered. Not a scrap of wreckage. Nothing. I talked to a former Navy pilot about this. Guy who'd flown through the Triangle 13 times. And he told me something that still gives me chills. He said, you know what's the scariest part? Not the equipment failures. It's the feeling of being watched. The feeling you're not alone in that cockpit anymore. Now look, I don't believe in ghost stories and all that supernatural bullshit. But I believe in data. And the data shows something weird is happening in that patch of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Over the past century, more than 1,000 people have disappeared there. More than 75 planes and ships. Gone. Vanished. And here's where it gets really twisted. The USS Cyclops. Navy cargo ship. 306 people on board. March 1918. It disappeared without sending a single distress call. The largest non-combat loss of life in US naval history. No storm. No enemy action. Just gone. Or how about Eastern Airlines Flight 401, 1945, 5 minutes from landing in Miami. Clear weather, experienced crew, vanished from radar. The last thing the tower heard was the pilot saying, "I see lights ahead, approaching rapidly." Then, nothing. But here's the thing that really messes with me. Sometimes, stuff comes back. The SS Cotopaxi disappeared in 1925. For almost a century, nobody knew what happened to it. Then in 2020, they found it. Just sitting there on the ocean floor. But here's the weird part. It was nowhere near where it sent its distress signal from. It was like it had been moved. Or like it went somewhere and came back. And it's not just ships and planes. It's equipment too. Compasses going haywire. GPS systems failing. Radio signals getting scrambled. And if you think this is all just coincidence or bad weather, then explain this to me. Why does it only happen in that exact area? Scientists have tried to explain it. Methane gas bubbles from the sea floor, rogue waves, electronic fog, geomagnetic anomalies. But none of these theories explain everything. They're just guessing, trying to fit a rational explanation to something that doesn't make sense. Eerie. One of the weirdest explanations comes from a guy named Bruce Gernon. He was flying a small plane through the Triangle in 1970. Says he entered a strange cloud tunnel and experienced what he calls time travel. His 30-minute flight took only 3 minutes. The instruments went crazy. When he came out, he was miles from where he should have been. Is he lying? Maybe. But what would be the point? The guy was just a normal pilot. No book deal at the time. No fame. Just a freaky experience he couldn't explain. Now, I'm not saying there's a portal to another dimension in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm not saying aliens are abducting ships. What I am saying is that something is happening there that we don't understand yet. Something that defies our current knowledge of physics. And here's what keeps me up at night. What if the Bermuda Triangle isn't the only place like this on Earth? What if there are others? Well, guess what? There are. And the next one is even worse. Burn. Imagine a place with a disappearance rate 4 times higher than anywhere else in America. A place so dangerous that native people who've lived there for 10,000 years refuse to camp there. A place where over 16,000 people have vanished since 1988. Welcome to the Alaska Triangle. But before we get into that nightmare, let me know in the comments if you've ever had weird experiences on the ocean. Equipment failing for no reason. Strange lights. That feeling of being watched. Because the more reports we collect, the closer we might get to figuring this thing out. And trust me, what happens in Alaska makes the Bermuda Triangle look like a kiddie pool. People don't just disappear there. They vanish in ways that make absolutely no fucking sense. Part 2. Alaska Triangle. Let's talk about Alaska. Not the Alaska you see in travel brochures. Not the cruise ship, see some whales, take some photos Alaska. I'm talking about the real Alaska. The one that will kill you without a second thought. I'm talking about a place so cold it'll freeze your spit before it hits the ground. Not your regular kind of cold. The kind of cold that burns your lungs when you breathe. The kind that makes your eyelashes freeze together when you blink. And right in the middle of this frozen hell is a triangle. Anchorage to Juneau to Barrow. The Alaska Triangle. A place where people vanish at a rate that makes no sense. We're talking 4 people out of every 1,000 who enter. Doesn't sound like much? Do the math. That's over 16,000 people since 1988. Gone. And that number keeps climbing. October 2018. A guy named Thomas and his wife were hiking in Denali National Park. Perfect weather. Well-traveled trail. Other hikers around. Everything normal. They stopped to take some photos. Thomas walked ahead a few steps to find a good angle. His wife bent down to tie her shoe. He wound. When she looked up, Thomas was gone. No sound. No footprints leading away. No signs of a struggle. Nothing. Just gone. Like he'd been erased from existence. They sent out a search party. 30 experienced rangers. Search dogs. Helicopters. Drones. Infrared cameras. They searched for 12 straight days. Nothing. Not a trace. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a drop of blood. Nothing. Now, you might think, well, he probably fell into a ravine or something. Sure. Except the dogs should have picked up his scent. The infrared should have found his body heat. The helicopters should have spotted him from above. But they found nothing. Like he'd never been there at all. And Thomas isn't the only one. This happens all the time in Alaska. People step around a corner, walk behind a tree, or just turn their back for a second, and someone disappears. Forever. The thing is, this isn't new. The Tlingit and Eskimo tribes have stories about this, going back thousands of years. They call it Kushtaka, a creature that's half man, half otter, that can shapeshift and lure humans into the wilderness and change them into one of its own kind. Now, I'm not saying there's some mythical creature out there kidnapping hikers, but I did talk to an 85-year-old Tlingit elder who told me, listen, we never camp in that triangle. Never. We learned that lesson 10,000 years ago. And the price for that lesson was extremely high. A geologist from the University of Washington studied the area. She discovered the terrain creates what she called chaotic magnetic fields, uneven, wildly fluctuating. This might explain why compasses don't work right, why GPS goes crazy, why people get disoriented, even on straight trails. But that doesn't explain the voices that survivors report hearing, calling their names from the forest, from under the ice, from places where no human could possibly be. A woman named Sarah was hiking near Juneau in 2016, got separated from her group for just 15 minutes. When they found her, she was huddled against a tree, sobbing, said she kept hearing her mother calling her. Except her mother had been dead for 6 years. Then there's the case of the Carver family. June 2012, camping near Barrow, parents and 2 kids. The father wakes up in the middle of the night, hears something outside their tent, steps out to check. The rest of the family hears him say, "What the hell?" Then nothing. They call out, no answer. They unzip the tent, nothing outside. No footprints in the soft ground, no sign of struggle. Just gone. Here's where it gets weird. 2 weeks later, the father's credit card was used at a gas station in Oklahoma. Security footage shows someone who looks exactly like him, but not quite right. Moving stiffly, not blinking. When police tried to follow up, the footage mysteriously corrupted. The only frame that survived shows the man's eyes reflecting the camera flash like an animal's would. Scientists have tried to explain these disappearances: sudden weather changes, hidden crevasses, animal attacks, but none of these explanations account for the sheer number of missing people or the bizarre circumstances. There's a researcher named Gary Williams who's been documenting Alaska Triangle disappearances for 20 years. He's collected over 800 cases, and he told me something disturbing. There's a pattern to when people vanish. It correlates with geomagnetic storm activity. When the Earth's magnetic field is disturbed, that's when people go missing. Think about that. Something about the Earth's magnetic field might be, what? Opening doorways? Creating temporary blind spots in reality? I don't know. But the correlation is there, in the data. In 2009, the FAA designated certain air corridors in Alaska as dead zones, areas where radio and radar coverage is unreliable. They blamed it on the mountains and remote terrain. But pilots who fly those routes tell a different story. They talk about moments of missing time, taking off and then suddenly being 100 miles further along their route with no memory of how they got there. A pilot named Mike Crandall was flying a small Cessna from Anchorage to Fairbanks in 2013, standard 1-hour flight. He landed, checked his watch, and only 20 minutes had passed. His fuel gauge showed he'd used a full hour's worth of fuel. His GPS log showed he'd flown the entire route. But somehow, he'd arrived 40 minutes early. Impossible. But here's what really makes me wonder. When people do disappear in the Alaska Triangle, search parties sometimes report strange phenomena. Equipment failures, radio static that sounds almost like voices, batteries draining instantly, GPS showing them in places they couldn't possibly be, like the middle of the ocean or even different continents. Maybe there's a natural explanation for all this. Maybe it's just the combination of harsh wilderness, extreme weather, and human error that makes the Alaska Triangle so deadly. But that doesn't explain the voices, the missing time, the way people vanish without a trace. And if you think that's strange, wait until we get to our next location, a place where no people disappear but where the laws of physics themselves seem to break down, where 100-pound rocks move on their own, like they're alive, or like something is controlling them. Part 3. Racetrack Playa. I've seen it with my own eyes, I swear to God. A rock the size of a motorcycle sitting in the middle of a bone-dry desert. And behind it, a long track like someone had dragged it across the sand. Nakhalan. But there were no footprints, no tire marks, no sign of humans or animals, nothing. Nakhalan. Welcome to Racetrack Playa in Death Valley, California. The place where rocks know how to walk. Good. I'm not talking about pebbles here. I'm talking about boulders. Some weighing over 700 pounds. Moving hundreds of feet across a perfectly flat desert floor, leaving long, straight tracks behind them. Like giant snails leaving trails. The first time I went there, I thought it was bullshit. Some elaborate hoax. People dragging rocks around when nobody's looking. But then I saw the size of these things. You'd need a truck to move some of them. and there were no vehicle tracks anywhere. Scientists have been trying to explain this phenomenon for over 70 years. The current theory is that when the playa floods and freezes over, thin sheets of ice form and strong winds can push the rocks across the slippery surface. Sure, that might explain some of it, but it doesn't explain why rocks of the same size move in completely different directions, even on the same night. Why some rocks travel in perfect zigzag patterns, making clean 90-degree turns like they're following a damn roadmap. And why the tracks only appear at night when no one is watching. In 2014, a research team from NASA set up 24/7 surveillance cameras. The result? The cameras malfunctioned on the nights when rocks moved. All the cameras. At the same time. Coincidence? Maybe. But this was NASA equipment, designed to work on fucking Mars, and they all failed simultaneously, only on the nights when rocks moved. A French geophysicist visited in 2019. He set up ultra-sensitive audio recorders and discovered something that made him pack up and never come back. Scraping sounds, tearing sounds, dragging sounds. But here's the strange part. These sounds weren't coming from ground level. They were coming from about 10 feet up in the air, where nothing visible existed. When the recordings were analyzed, they found something else. Beneath the scraping was another sound. Something that sound engineers described as structured. Patterns. Repetitions. Almost like language. I know how that sounds. I do. But I'm just telling you what's in the report. There's a local legend about Racetrack Playa. The Timbisha Shoshone people avoided this place for centuries. They called it the Devil's Racetrack long before white settlers arrived. They said it was where invisible beings held contests, racing against each other using rocks as markers. Silly superstition, right? Then explain why, in 1972, two rocks weighing over 300 pounds each moved in perfect parallel lines exactly 20 feet apart for over half a mile. Then both turned right at the exact same spot, then continued another quarter mile in perfect sync. Danger doesn't work that way. Random doesn't work that way. Here's another weird thing. The rocks don't move every night. Sometimes they'll sit still for years. Then suddenly dozens will move on the same night, like they're responding to some signal we can't detect. In the winter of 2013, over 60 rocks moved on a single night. Some traveled over 700 feet. The largest one weighed more than 700 pounds. It moved 180 feet. Do you have any idea how much force it would take to move a 700-pound rock across dry ground? A lot more than wind could generate, I'll tell you that much. Pervol, NASA researcher Paula Wilson has a theory. She thinks it might be related to infrasound sound frequencies below what humans can hear. These low-frequency vibrations can travel long distances through the ground and air. They can move objects, shatter glass, even cause hallucinations in people. The playa sits in a geographic bowl surrounded by mountains. Perfect for amplifying and focusing infrasound waves. But that still doesn't explain the intelligent-seeming movements, the coordinated patterns. Unless the infrasound isn't natural. Unless someone or something is generating it deliberately. Crazy? Probably. But when you stand there on that cracked desert floor, looking at those huge rocks with their mysterious trails behind them, anything seems possible. So now we have 3 locations, 2 triangles in a desert where reality seems softer somehow, where physics gets bent. But what happens when reality doesn't just bend, but threatens to break entirely? A place where the power to destroy half of North America sleeps right beneath our feet? 4. Yellowstone supervolcano. Millions of people visit Yellowstone National Park every year, taking pictures, camping, laughing, having a grand old time. Completely unaware they're standing on a ticking time bomb. Not just any volcano, a supervolcano. With a magma chamber so massive it makes Mount St. Helens look like a fucking matchstick. If it erupts and scientists say it will, we're not talking about a few villages getting buried, we're talking about an extinction-level event. Half of the United States covered in ash, global temperatures dropping by 10 degrees, crop failures worldwide, billions dead. Sweet dreams, right? But it's not just the eruption risk that makes this place terrifying. There are areas within the park where animals never go. Not sometimes. Never. Ecologists call them dead zones. No signs of plant life, no insects, no bacteria, not even bacteria in the soil. Like something is making every living creature know that place isn't safe. I spoke with a park ranger off the record, obviously. 23 years on the job. He told me about a particular area near the West Thumb Geyser Basin. About 2 acres of seemingly normal forest. Except, nothing lives there. No birds nest in those trees. No squirrels run up those trunks. Even flies won't land there. They've tested the soil, the air, the water. Nothing unusual. No radiation. No toxic chemicals. Nothing that explains why life avoids this place like it's death itself. As well, Yellowstone has over 1,000 small earthquakes every year, most too small to feel. But in 2017, a series of 400 earthquakes happened within 1 week. Seismologists went nuts. Not because of the number. Because of the pattern. They formed a shape, an unnatural shape. A perfect spiral, like someone was deliberately creating them. When a geologist named Dr. Marcus Ryder pointed this out at a conference, his funding was cut the next day. His research disappeared from university servers, and he was quietly asked to take a sabbatical. He hasn't published since. 3 park rangers went missing in Yellowstone in 2018, in the way we're now familiar with. No traces, no blood, like they stepped through an invisible door. The government said they got lost in a snowstorm. But I spoke to the wife of one of them. She said her husband called home the night before he disappeared. He said the ground was breathing, and there were lights coming up from below. Not magma. Lights with patterns. She reported this to his supervisors. The next day, her husband vanished. A week later, men in plain clothes came to her house, took her husband's computer, his journals, his phone, said it was part of the investigation. She never got them back. Here's something else that keeps me up at night. In 2003, a group of microbiologists discovered a new type of extremophile bacteria in Yellowstone's hot springs. Organisms that shouldn't be able to exist. They consume metals. They thrive in temperatures that would cook any other life form, and their DNA doesn't match anything on Earth. The official explanation? They evolved in isolation, adapted to extreme conditions. But Dr. Elena Kostova, one of the researchers, had a different theory. She thought these microbes might not be from here at all. That they might have hitched a ride on something that came from elsewhere and arrived very, very long ago. 2 weeks after she shared this theory, her lab suffered a catastrophic fire. All samples destroyed. All data lost. Dr. Kostova took a position with a private research firm and signed an NDA so strict she can't even acknowledge she ever worked at Yellowstone. Convenient, right? Then there's the Old Faithful Geyser, famous for its predictable eruptions. Except, it's becoming less predictable. The intervals between eruptions are getting longer. The pattern that held for hundreds of years is breaking down. Chi. Some geologists say it's natural variation. Others fear it might be a sign the whole system is destabilizing. But there's another theory. A fringe theory, admittedly, that something down there, something very deep, is changing the plumbing system. Deliberately. Like, it's waking up. In August 2021, seismic sensors picked up something strange, a rhythmic pattern of vibrations, too regular to be natural, too deep to be human-caused. It lasted for 6 minutes and 23 seconds, then stopped abruptly. When it was analyzed, audio engineers said it resembled a heartbeat. The USGS deleted the data from public servers 2 days later, said it was equipment malfunction. Nothing to worry about. But a technician who worked there told me that wasn't no equipment malfunction. That was something big. Something moving. So we've got 4 locations now, 4 places where reality stretches thin. But at least they're all being studied. At least we know they exist. But there's another place. A forest in Europe, where hundreds of people have walked in, and when they walked out, they weren't themselves anymore. Part 5, Hoia Baciu Forest. I went there in the winter of 2019, Hoia Baciu Forest in Romania. The Bermuda Triangle of forests. And I laughed. A normal forest. Trees. Animals. What's to be afraid of? 3 hours later, I ran out of that forest, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest, and a deep conviction that time isn't a straight line, it's a maze. And there are places, like Hoia Baciu, where the passages intersect. This forest isn't like any I've ever seen. The trees grow twisted, not because of wind or natural conditions. They twist like they're trying to pull themselves out of the ground, like they're trying to escape from something. At the center of the forest is a perfect clearing, a circle where no trees grow. Not because the soil is barren, not because of chemicals. The soil samples are completely normal. But never, in over 200 years of observation, has a sapling grown there and survived more than a week. Scientists have tried transplanting mature trees into that clearing. They die within days. Their root systems somehow dissolved, like they were digested. A local guide named Gabor took me through the forest. Old guy, lived nearby his whole life. About halfway through our hike, he stopped, pointed to a tree, an ancient beech. Its trunk spiraled like a corkscrew. My grandfather helped the police search this forest in 1947, he said. A little girl went missing, 5 years old. They found her 3 days later, sitting in that tree, 40 feet up, smiling, not scared, not hungry, clean, like she'd just been placed there minutes before. When they got her down, she said she'd been with the nice lady and that she'd only been gone for a little while. Her clothes weren't dirty, her hair was combed, and in her pocket was a flower that botanists later confirmed doesn't exist in Europe or anywhere else they could identify. The girl grew up, lived a normal life, except for one thing: she never aged normally. At 30, she looked 15. At 60, she looked 30. She died in 2009 at age 67, looking maybe 40. Medical anomaly, they said, genetic quirk, but the locals knew better. In 1968, a military photographer captured something on film, a disc-shaped object over Hoia Baciu. The photo was analyzed by NASA and American intelligence agencies. Their conclusions were never published, but the man disappeared 1 week after submitting the film. He reappeared in 1997, wandering on a road in Budapest, confused, not knowing who he was, and strangest of all, not aged a day, like time had skipped over him. Local people call Hoia Baciu the doorway. They say there are days when the gate opens, days when if you walk into the forest, you might step out, somewhere else, or someone else. A couple disappeared there in 2012, a whole search party. Found nothing. 3 days later, the couple appeared at the exact spot they vanished from, clothes clean, alert, and they swore they'd only been walking in the forest for about an hour. On their phone, pictures of a forest, but not Hoia Baciu. A forest with species of trees that botanists say don't exist on Earth. I know how this sounds. I do. But I'm just telling you what's in the report, what people experienced. During my visit, I felt it too, not anything I could put my finger on. Just wrong. Like the angles didn't quite match up. Like distances changed when you weren't looking directly at them. A path that took 20 minutes to walk down, somehow, only took 5 minutes to return on. My watch stopped working. Not just ran out of battery, the mechanical parts inside froze. The watchmaker who examined it later said the gears looked like they'd been subjected to temperatures of minus 200 degrees. Impossible. But the creepiest thing happened when I was leaving. I checked my phone. Took some pictures. Nothing unusual. Then, about a mile from the forest boundary, I checked my photos. There was an extra one I didn't take, a selfie of me, smiling, standing in front of a tree I'd never seen, wearing clothes I'd worn the day before. The metadata said it was taken 3 hours in the future. I deleted it immediately, then threw my phone away, got a new one the next day, new number, everything. Call me crazy. I don't care. I know what I saw. New one the next day. The locals have stories going back centuries. They say the forest sits on a thin spot, a place where the membrane between, I don't know, realities, dimensions, whatever you want to call it, is fragile. They say things slip through sometimes, From there to here. And from here to there. People. Animals. Objects. In 2007, a hiker found an old camera. A Kodak model from the 1970s. The film inside was intact. When developed, it showed pictures of Hoia Baciu. But different. The trees were arranged wrong. The landscape was slightly altered, like a parallel version of the same forest. The last photo on the roll showed a group of people looking up at the camera, terrified, like it was floating above them. The camera was spotless, no water damage, no rust, like it had been left there the day before, not 30 years earlier. Maybe there's a rational explanation for all of this. Maybe Hoia Baciu is just a forest with weird trees and too many legends attached to it. But it doesn't explain the time discrepancies, the objects that appear and disappear, the way electronic equipment fails in specific patterns. So now we have 5 locations. 5 places where reality seems thinner somehow, where the rules we think are fixed bend. But what if all these places are connected? What if they're all part of a pattern? A grid that covers the Earth? That's exactly what we're going to explore next. A place where 4 American states meet. And also the site of more UFO reports, more cattle mutilations, and more paranormal activity than anywhere else in American history. Part 6. 4 corners. 4 states meeting at a single point. Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado. Tourists stand there all the time taking cheesy photos. Look at me, I'm in 4 states at once. They have no idea what they're standing on. This region contains the highest concentration of unexplained phenomena in the continental United States. UFO sightings, animal mutilations, vanishings, underground sounds, lights in the sky that move with intelligence, and something the native people call skinwalkers. The Navajo and Hopi have avoided certain areas here for thousands of years. Sacred land, they call it. Forbidden land, where the veil is thin. Nares, I spoke with a Navajo elder named Thomas Bedigay, 82 years old, Vietnam vet, not the kind of guy who scares easily. He told me, our people have always known there are doorways here, places where the worlds touch. The white man thinks he discovered this land. We've been protecting mankind from what lives here for generations. In the 1970s, a wave of cattle mutilations swept through this region. Over 9,000 documented cases, cows found with organs removed, no blood left in the body, no tracks around them. Surgical precision, cuts made with something hotter than any scalpel, the wounds were cauterized instantly, no bloody. Law enforcement was baffled. The FBI investigated. Their conclusion? Inconclusive. But ranchers who've lived there for generations have their own theories. They talk about lights in the sky the night before finding mutilated animals. They talk about the way their dogs howl and hide, the way horses panic for no apparent reason. Kufrischer Schaffer. One rancher, Dave Wilson, set up trail cameras around his property after losing 6 cattle in 2 months. The cameras captured something unusual, not aliens, not monsters, something more disturbing. People. At least, they looked like people. Walking with strange, jerky movements in the middle of nowhere. At 3 in the morning. Temperature well below freezing. No vehicles nearby. Just walking across his land, miles from any road. When he showed the footage to the sheriff, the memory card was blank. Every photo gone. The sheriff suggested he'd imagined it all. 2 days later, Wilson found another mutilated cow. This time, whatever did it left a message. Symbols carved into the ground around the carcass. Symbols that archaeologists later identified as matching ancient Anasazi cave drawings. From a civilization that disappeared without explanation over 800 years ago. Fire. Wilson sold his ranch the next month. Moved to Oregon. Refuses to talk about it anymore. Then there's the underground base conspiracy. For decades, people have reported strange sounds coming from beneath the ground near Dulce, New Mexico, right on the edge of the Four Corners region. Humming, drilling, what sounds like enormous machinery. In 1979, a physicist named Paul Benowitz claimed he'd intercepted electronic communications from an underground facility there. Said it was a joint human-alien base. Everyone called him crazy. He lost his security clearance, lost his government contracts, eventually had a nervous breakdown. But here's the thing. In 2016, geological surveys confirmed there are large, hollow spaces under Dulce, at least 6 levels deep. The official explanation? Natural cave formations, sure. Natural caves with perfectly flat floors and right-angle turns. I visited Dulce myself in 2018, spent 2 weeks there, talked to locals. Most wouldn't say a word on record. But off the record? They told me about the black helicopters that come and go at night. The unmarked trucks. The men in suits measuring radiation levels in remote areas. And they told me about the dreams. Shared dreams. Multiple people in town having identical nightmares on the same nights. Dreams of being taken underground. Of lights and examinations. Of things watching them that looked almost human, but not quite. Mass hysteria? Maybe. But these weren't crazy people. These were normal folks. Ranchers. Teachers. Cops. People with no reason to make this shit up. Crazy. One night, I drove out to a mesa, about 20 miles from town. Just to watch the stars. Middle of nowhere. No light pollution. Around 2 a.m., my car died. Completely. Not just the engine. The battery. My phone. My flashlight. Everything electrical just stopped. Then I saw it. A light moving across the sky. Not an airplane. Not a helicopter. It was moving too fast, then stopping completely, making right-angle turns. Impossible maneuvers. Then it shot straight up and vanished. Could have been a drone, I guess. Some military test. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was aware. Like it knew I was watching it. Jeez. My car started working about 10 minutes after the light disappeared. Everything came back on at once. No explanation. The most disturbing part of the Four Corners phenomena isn't the lights or the mutilations or the sounds. It's the skinwalkers. In Navajo tradition, these are witches who can transform into animals. Evil beings that can mimic human voices, luring people away from safety. Modern reports describe something more physical, something that looks like a person from a distance but moves wrong, too fast, too jerky. Like it's wearing a human body it doesn't quite know how to operate. In 2011, a group of hikers near Shiprock, New Mexico, captured something on video. The footage shows what looks like a man standing about 100 yards away, just watching them. When they call out, it drops to all fours and runs into the brush. Not crawling. Running. On all fours. Like an animal. But way too fast. The video ends there. The hikers said their camera battery died immediately after. So what's happening in Four Corners? Government experiments? Alien activity? Ancient forces? I don't know. But I do know this, it's part of a pattern. A grid of locations around the world where strange things happen. Where reality seems to break down. And our next stop on this grid is a mountain in California that some believe houses an entire civilization inside it. Part 7. Mount Shasta. Rising 14,000 feet from Northern California's landscape stands Mount Shasta. Beautiful, majestic, and according to thousands of reports, home to a civilization that shouldn't exist. The mountain itself looks normal enough. A dormant volcano, snow-capped, surrounded by forests. But ask the locals, and they'll tell you Shasta isn't just a mountain, it's a doorway. Native tribes considered this place sacred for thousands of years. The Karuk, Modoc, and Shasta people all have legends about it being the home of the Creator, the center of the universe. They say a hidden city exists inside the mountain, inhabited by advanced beings they call the Shining Ones. Just another indigenous myth? Maybe. Except people keep seeing things there. Things that don't make sense. In 1934, a forest fire swept through the area. Dozens of firefighters reported seeing a group of tall, robed figures emerge from the mountain, stand watching the flames, then raise their arms in unison. The fire stopped advancing, just stopped, like it hit an invisible wall. Then the figures turned and walked back into the solid rock face, disappeared. Prow. All the firefighters filed reports. All told the same story. None of them knew each other before that day. Mass hallucination from smoke inhalation? That's the official explanation. But firefighters know about smoke inhalation, they're trained for it, and they all insisted they were thinking clearly. Then there's the Lemurian connection. According to occult traditions, Lemuria was an ancient continent that sank beneath the Pacific Ocean thousands of years ago like Atlantis. The survivors supposedly fled to Mount Shasta, where they built an underground city called Telos. Crazy talk, right? Ancient lost civilizations living inside a mountain? Then, explain the lights. Hundreds of witnesses over decades report seeing bright lights moving in and out of the mountain at night, lights that don't follow aircraft patterns, that appear and disappear instantly, that seem to phase through solid rock. Benita Domp wrote, in 1977, a pilot flying near Shasta reported seeing a glow of light open in the side of the mountain. A metallic craft emerged, hovered briefly, then shot upward at incredible speed. The FAA investigated. Their conclusion? The pilot saw a weather anomaly, despite the fact that it was a clear day with no unusual weather patterns. I spent a week at Mount Shasta in 2017, talked to locals, hiked the trails. Most people there fall into one of two camps. The rational ones who think all the stories are bullshit, and the true believers who think Shasta houses everything from aliens to interdimensional beings to actual angels. But there was a third group. People who didn't want to talk at all, who changed the subject when I mentioned lights or underground cities, who seemed afraid. One night I camped near Panther Meadows, about halfway up the mountain. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a humming sound. Not machinery, more like chanting. A chorus of voices, but at a pitch that seemed to vibrate through my whole body. Horror. I got out of my tent. The night was clear. Stars everywhere. And there, moving across the face of the mountain, was a line of lights. Not flashlights, more like glowing orbs, moving in perfect formation. Too high up to be hikers. Too organized to be natural phenomena. I watched for about 10 minutes. Then they just winked out, all at once, like someone flipped a switch. Could have been some kind of military exercise, I guess. Some secret project. But why here? Why at night? And why would the military be conducting operations on a public mountain without cordoning off the area? The next morning, I met an old guy at a coffee shop in the town of Shasta. Vietnam vet. Former park ranger. Lived there 40 years. I told him what I saw. Expected him to laugh. Instead, he just nodded. They come and go, he said. Been doing it since before white men ever set foot here. The Indians knew about them. Called them the Star People. He told me about a cave he found when he was working as a ranger. Not on any official map. Hidden behind a waterfall. He explored about 100 feet in before coming to a wall that seemed to be made of metal, not stone. Perfectly smooth. Warm to the touch. No seams or rivets. Just a solid metal wall in the middle of a natural cave. He reported it to his supervisors. They sent a team to investigate. Came back saying there was no metal wall, just ordinary rock. When he went back to show them they were wrong, the cave entrance had disappeared. Completely gone. Like it had never existed. Could he have imagined it? Sure. But this wasn't some New Age crystal enthusiast. This was a practical, down-to-earth guy who spent his life in these mountains. The most documented case at Mount Shasta involves a guy named J.C. Brown. In 1934, he claimed to have discovered a series of tunnels inside the mountain that led to an underground city. Said he found mummies, gold artifacts, and strange machinery. Said the place looked thousands of years old, but the technology seemed advanced. He organized an expedition of 80 people to go back and document it all. The night before they were set to leave, Brown disappeared, never seen again. The expedition never happened. Most of his notes and maps vanished too. How? Hoax? Probably. But some of Brown's artifacts ended up in private collections. Metallurgical tests dated some of them to over 14,000 years old. Made with alloys that weren't supposed to exist back then. In 2003, A group of hikers got lost on Shasta during a sudden snowstorm. They took shelter in a cave. As the storm raged outside, they ventured deeper, hoping to find better protection from the cold. What they found instead was a tunnel, smooth-walled, warm, leading downward. They followed it for what they estimated was about a mile before coming to a door. Not a natural formation, an actual door with strange symbols carved into it. They were debating whether to try opening it when they heard voices on the other side, speaking a language they didn't recognize, and footsteps approaching. They ran, all the way back up the tunnel, through the cave, into the storm. When search and rescue found them the next day, all four were suffering from hypothermia and frostbite, conditions they shouldn't have developed if they'd actually found a warm tunnel to shelter in. The official report chalked it up to hallucinations from extreme cold and fear. But all four told the exact same story, down to the specific symbols on the door. Symbols that, when later identified, matched ancient Sanskrit writings. None of these hikers had any knowledge of Sanskrit. Hepacid. So what's inside Mount Shasta? A lost civilization? An alien base? Nothing at all? Epacid. I don't know. But something is happening there. Something that's been happening for centuries. And it's connected to our next location, a place where gold and death are intertwined. Where dozens have died, searching for a treasure that might not even exist. 8. Superstition Mountains. 40 miles east of Phoenix, Arizona, rise the Superstition Mountains. Jagged peaks, brutal terrain, beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. These mountains have claimed more lives than Everest. Not from altitude or weather, but from something the Apache called the curse, a darkness that protects what's hidden there. The story begins with the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. According to legend, a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz discovered an impossibly rich gold deposit somewhere in these mountains in the 1870s. On his deathbed in 1891, he supposedly gave clues to its location. People have been dying to find it ever since, literally dying. Since 1940, over 200 people have perished while searching for the mine, not just from exposure or falls, though those happen too, but from circumstances that defy explanation. Bodies found without a mark on them, eyes wide open in terror, experienced hikers who vanish without a trace, people found decapitated, or with their organs removed, or arranged in bizarre ritualistic patterns. The Apache never built settlements in these mountains, never hunted there. They believed the place was protected by thunder gods who would kill any trespassers. The Spanish conquistadors called it Monte Superstition after witnessing strange lights and hearing disembodied voices there. Modern rational explanations? Drug runners, border crossings, territorial prospectors killing competitors. Sure, except the killings and disappearances have been happening since long before the drug trade, and they follow patterns that no human criminal would create. In 1956, a group of 5 treasure hunters went into the mountains, all experienced outdoorsmen, well-equipped. They told friends they'd found a map showing the mine's location, said they'd be gone a week. 3 weeks later, search parties found their camp, equipment still there, food laid out for a meal, coffee pot still on a burned-out fire, no signs of struggle, no tracks leading away. All 5 men gone. 4 of them were never found. Holific camp. The 5th was discovered 2 years later, just his skull, sitting on a rock, facing east, exactly east, like it had been placed there with a compass. The medical examiner found no marks on the bone, no way to determine cause of death. In 1982, a geologist named Randy Powell went to survey the area. Professional scientist, skeptic about the legends, found a cave system not on any official map. Inside, he discovered what he described as petroglyphs unlike any Native American art I've ever seen. Symbols that looked more like circuit diagrams than primitive art. He took photos, collected samples. When he got home, the film was blank. The rock samples had crumbled to dust. A week later, his house burned down. Fire department called it electrical. All his notes and records destroyed. Powell never returned to the mountains, switched his field of study from geology to marine biology, moved to Florida. When contacted for interviews about his experience, he hangs up. Won't talk about it. I spent 3 days in the superstitions in 2016, not looking for gold. Just trying to understand what makes this place different. What makes it deadly? Nakaba. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the normal quiet of wilderness. This is different. Absolute. No birds, no insects, nothing. Like sound itself is being absorbed. Akmanavyun. The second thing is the sense of being watched. Not just the normal awareness you might feel in predator country. This is more specific. More focused. Like intelligent eyes tracking your every move. I made camp in a canyon the first night. Nothing fancy, one-man tent, small fire. Around midnight I heard rocks falling. Not unusual in mountains. But these weren't random. They had rhythm. Like someone tapping out a code. The second night, I camped higher up. Near an area locals call the Massacre Grounds, where Apache supposedly killed a group of Mexican miners in the 1840s. I was setting up my tent when I found something half buried in the dirt. A gold button. Old. Spanish design, not something a modern hiker would carry. I put it in my pocket. Thought it might be a cool souvenir. That night, I woke to the sound of breathing right outside my tent. Heavy. Not animal, human, but wrong somehow. Too deep, too rhythmic. Ingo. I had my gun ready. Called out. No answer. Just that breathing. I unzipped the tent. Nothing there. No tracks in the dirt. But the breathing continued. Right in front of me. From empty air. Bunny. I fired a shot. The sound echoed through the canyon. The breathing stopped. Then, from much further away, I heard laughter. Multiple voices. Echoing from all directions. Cunningal. I spent the rest of the night with my back against a rock, gun in hand. At dawn, I packed up and got the hell out. Cunningal. On the hike down, I reached for the gold button in my pocket. It was gone. In its place was a small, smooth stone with a symbol carved into it. A spiral with strange markings. I showed it to an archaeologist friend later. He said it looked Mesopotamian, roughly 5,000 years old. I still have that stone. Still don't know how it got in my pocket, or where the button went. The most recent death in the superstitions was in 2019. A man named James Williams, experienced hiker, found 2 days after being reported missing. Cause of death? Unknown. No injuries. No signs of dehydration or heat stroke. Just dead. The autopsy found one anomaly: his bone marrow had completely disappeared. Medical impossibility, according to 3 separate doctors. In his backpack was a journal. The last entry read, "I can hear them walking around the camp at night. They don't sound human. Going to try to get out tomorrow. I think they're hurting me somewhere. God help me." His camera contained dozens of photos, all normal landscape shots, except the last one, taken about an hour before his estimated time of death. It shows what appears to be a tall, thin figure standing among the rocks about 100 yards away, too blurry to make out details, but clearly bipedal, clearly watching him. The official explanation? Shadow and pareidolia, the tendency for humans to see faces and figures in random patterns. But that doesn't explain why the image contains a heat signature, one that registered at over 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The Superstition Mountains hold something. Something that doesn't want to be found. Something that kills to protect its secrets. Is it the gold mine? Some ancient sacred site? A doorway like the others we've discussed? Fire. I don't know. So there we have it. 8 places where reality seems to bend. 8 points on a map that shouldn't connect, but do. I've spent years tracking these anomalies, talking to witnesses, collecting evidence. And the deeper I dig, the more convinced I become that we're missing something fundamental about the world we live in. These aren't just random weird spots, there's a pattern here, a network. Look at a globe. Plot these locations. They form a grid, equally spaced points that wrap around the entire planet. Greatse. The Bermuda Triangle, the Alaska Triangle, Racetrack Playa, Yellowstone, Hoya Baciu, Four Corners, Mount Shasta, the Superstition Mountains, Ataya. And there are others I haven't even touched yet. Many others. Places where people vanish, where physics breaks down, where things appear and disappear without explanation. Vitaya. What if these aren't separate mysteries? What if they're all manifestations of the same phenomenon? I don't claim to have the answers, but I do know this. Our understanding of reality is incomplete. The universe is stranger than we can imagine. And somewhere in these mysterious locations lies a truth that could change everything we think we know. I'm gonna keep digging, keep investigating. There are more places to explore, more witnesses to interview, more patterns to uncover. I'll share what I find, no matter how strange or unsettling it might be. Listen, I need your help with this. If you've experienced anything strange at these locations or anywhere else that seems to defy explanation, drop it in the comments. Your story might be the missing piece that helps connect the dots. Got thoughts on which mystery I should tackle next? Let me know. Got evidence or experiences of your own? I want to hear them. Think I'm full of shit? That's cool too. Tell me why. I'm not here to convert believers or mock skeptics. I'm just looking for the truth, whatever it might be. If you found this valuable, hit that like button. If you didn't, dislike works too. Feedback helps me know what you guys want to hear. And if you know someone who's interested in these mysteries, someone who asks questions about the world that others are afraid to ask, share this with them. This is Faded Lore, reminding you that the world is much stranger than they want you to believe. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep your eyes open. Because sometimes, the most important things are hiding in plain sight. I'll catch you next time.